is the Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener Radio Show. Wherever you may be listening, however you may be listening, whether on 860 WNOV or W293CX 106.5, through the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com radio tab, social media, the TuneIn app, or the Simple Radio app, we are live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin to help you grow more of the food you like to eat. So we're going to cover how much can you really plant in your garden. Now, obviously, that is a very broad question to ask based on the size of a garden that you grow. Are you growing a 1,800 square foot garden? Are you growing a couple of containers on your porch, patio, or deck? We're going to try to cover as much as we can here in the first segment. Obviously, we can't we can't go over every variety of vegetable and what can't container and how much can you plant. But we're going to try to cover as much as we can here to help you understand that it's not just traditional rows like the Victory Garden or rows like agricultural fields are. You can do a lot of different things and get a lot of crops in one small area.
Right. So one option is to do the square foot gardening. And this is a very popular option, especially if you are growing in a raised bed or if you want to get the most amount for your space.
Now, square foot gardening was invented by Mel Buell back like early 70s, I think. He's passed away now. But the concept and the technique is, let's say you have a 4 by 4 foot raised bed, 16 square feet. You grid it off to you so you have 16 1 square foot areas. In each one of those square foot areas, you can plant a variety of numbers of the same species or same type of vegetables or fruits. And there's grids online for every single type. And we're going to go over a couple of them. Some of them you can plant a lot in one square, others you can't. So go over some of the square foot growing capabilities here.
Okay, so for example, you would want to plant 1 tomato, 1 pepper plant. And then
you could get 9 onions in 1 square foot.
And comparatively, you could put 2 cucumbers in 1 square foot. And then something like, carrots.
You can get 16 carrots.
16 carrots. And then beets is 9. So you kind of have to think about what you're growing and how much space it's going to take. And then also how much it needs to feed off of from that soil.
Right. And for example, you can get 16 radishes in 1 square foot. So in those 16 radishes, those radishes take about 28 to 32 days to reach maturity. So you pull those radishes out after 32 days, and you can put 9 bean plants right back in that square foot area when the square foot around that may house a pepper plant, may house a broccoli plant, something like that, rosemary. So you can have basically 16 different plants in one square in a 16 square foot bed.
And one thing to note here, and we're going to talk about herbs in the next segment, but herbs are not all the same when it comes to square foot gardening. You can fit 9 cilantro plants in a square foot versus 1 plant of sage, and then versus 2 plants of basil. Now,
I want to caution people that whenever you see square foot gardening charts, they may say like 12 leaf lettuce plants or spinach plants in 1 square foot. Don't do that. Mass plant or intensely plant. So instead of putting 12 lettuce plants in 1 square foot, broadcast your seeds because they're very small. You get 1,000 seeds in one package at mygardener.com. And you have 50 or 60 plants in 1 square foot area. So you have a harvest. Because if you're just waiting on 12 plants of lettuce to get mature, you're not going to have much lettuce.
So let's talk about maybe you're not growing in the ground or raised bed and you're growing in containers.
Okay.
And that's kind of a different idea. And so it's a little bit different. So you might think, okay, well, you can grow 1 tomato in 1 square foot. What can I grow a tomato in a container?
It depends on the size of the container. Number 1 rule of all containers, you won't need drainage holes because roots need oxygen, and if they don't have holes or drainage holes in the bottom of the containers, they will fill up with water, whether you water them too much or it rains, and they will drown. So number 1 rule there. Number 2, based on the size. So a 5-gallon bucket with holes in the bottom works well for a tomato plant. Ideally, a half of a whiskey barrel would be even better. But a 5-gallon bucket is fine. A 10-gallon grow bag is even better. And a pepper plant can grow in a you can put 2 pepper plants in a 5-gallon grow bag. Lettuce, you can plant hundreds of seeds in a grow bag. Now, when I talk about grow bag, these are these cloth containers that look like circular with a bottom on it. That's cloth that can fold up at the end of the season. Root Maker has the white canvas covering around it. Makes it very pleasing. And they come in sizes from 1 gallon to 60 gallon, okay? So you have a mass variety of items sizes in which you can choose to grow. Eggplant, one eggplant in a 5 or 7 gallon. We went over to tomato plant, one in a 5-gallon bucket or a 10-gallon grow bag. Lettuce, spinach, potatoes, you can get 2 potatoes in a 10-gallon grow bag, or you'd probably squeeze 2 in a 5-gallon bucket, really to get your maximum out of it. Onions, you can get about 9 in a 5 to 7-gallon grow bag. So you can go online and find hundreds and hundreds of different scenarios in which your favorite crop can be grown, and you can even do vine crops in containers. You just need the largest amount of a container as possible for those vine crops.
Right. So then another thing to know also is if you have a smaller space is to trellis what you're planting, especially when it comes to a lot of those vine crops. You want to trellis them, and it's good for your plants to get them off the ground. And then with tomatoes, you want to cage them or stake them. So let's talk about intercropping. Okay,
intercropping is a term in which you can grow 2 crops in the same area as one. Now, intercropping, you can grow a fast-growing crop in amongst slow-growing crops. So a lot of people will plant carrots, and then between the carrot rows, you space the carrots about 8 to 12 inches apart. Between those rows, you'll plant radishes. Radishes get done in 32 days. So you're maximizing your space. You're splitting the rows of the carrots.
But then there's also the intercropping concept of something like the Three Sisters, where you plant the corn, you plant the
beans,
the pole beans, and then you plant the squash. And the corn is the trellis for the beans, and the squash is a ground covering.
Right. The myth of the beans feed the corn, that's just simply not true. This is the way the Native Americans did it. But you can't plant it all at the same time.
No.
The corn, you got to get the corn established, a foot or so. Then you plant your beans because they're very aggressive, very quick growing, and your squash all at the same time, and then they'll grow together. And that concept. Back to your intercropping. You can do cabbage, you can do celery amongst cabbage, beets among cabbage family. Carrots, you can intercrop carrots with radishes, lettuce, rosemary, onions. You can even do it with tomatoes. That's a little bigger crop, that type of thing. But maximizing your space is what I'm trying to explain. Even in a container, based on the size of the container, you can plant carrots, give a little space, plant radishes. Those radishes are going to outgrow the carrots, and you can pull them out and eat them and still have your carrots growing in that. Now, I want to talk briefly about polyculture, because this is a way in which you can get 2 crops. It's similar to intercropping, but it has an additional benefit.
Throughout time, we've lost a lot of different varieties of vegetables just due to, why would you say?
Selection of large entities forcing the commercial market to accept only certain varieties based on the longevity of shelf life or the easiness to grow those specific varieties of vegetables and fruits.
Right. So with that, polyculture helps expand that. And it also, what were you going to say?
Polyculture, it helps. Polyculture, you can grow 2 crops in one area. Right. So, for example here, you grow a zucchini plant, and around that zucchini plant, you plant basil. That basil emits that aroma of basil and masks the smell of the squash plant or the zucchini plant, and that you have a much less likely chance of squash bugs or the squash vine borer or other insects attacking that squash plant because it can't get to it. It doesn't smell it because of the aroma that the basil has around that particular plant. And this works in other scenarios. Just like, and let's be real, you don't want to take a shower, so you spray yourself with some good smelling stuff. That's the same thing that's happening in the garden. That basil is overpowering the smell of the zucchini plant, and you're actually getting basil and zucchini in the same spot, but you're not. It's a great way of controlling bad insects without using insecticides, harmful insecticides, or organic practices.
It also can be a great way of attracting good insects, too.
Right. Let's go over just a real brief mathematical problem here of how much you can squeeze in a typical 4x8 raised bed. Now, this is some people, that's kind of the general size. 4x8 raised bed, 32 square feet.
Okay, so we'll do the beans one because
Right.
a lot of people like
This is excessive, but this is what shows how much you can really cram in a spot.
Okay, so in that same 32 square feet, you could do 9 plants per square feet, and that's about 288 bean plants.
Bush beans.
Yeah, bush beans. Now, if you did rows, you would do 4 rows that are 4 inches of spacing, 1 foot apart. That's 96 plants. So if you think about that, that's a difference of 192 plants in the same amount of space.
That's a lot of bean plants in one area. Now, that's excessive, but beans are one of those plants that you can plant a lot, can preserve, freeze. Another scenario, and you've got to love radishes for this one, is a 4x8 square foot bed, 32 square feet, 16 radishes per square foot. That's 512 radishes in this bed. If you did rows, you would be 4 rows at 1 foot apart, 1 inch spacing. That'd be 96 plants. That's a difference of 384 radish plants. So, or that's a difference of 128 radish plants. So you can get a lot more radishes in a square foot method, and you don't have to have a raised bed to do square foot gardening. You can do it in traditional ground. Just grid it off and go that route.
Right.
So, so that hopefully that enlightens you. That helps inspire you to maximize more of the space, whether you're growing in containers, raised beds, traditional ground, or straw bale gardening. Also, you can do it that way. If you're in the Milwaukee or surrounding areas, just tune your radio to 860 AM or FM 106.5. You can also find links on our Facebook pages, The Wisconsin Vegetable Gardener and Home Canning. Our website, thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com, click on the radio tab at the top of the page, then click on the Listen Live button, and you'll have immediately access to our live program. Mobile devices work very well also. Go to your app store and download for free the TuneIn app or the Simple Radio app. Then search WNOV 860, save it to your favorites, and you can have access to our radio show live wherever you're at in the world. Our radio program will also have podcast replay under the radio tab several days following the live broadcast. You can find all of these links in the show notes below. Our show airs 9 to 10 a.m. Central Standard Time every Saturday, March through the end of October. And we want to thank our sponsors because without them, this would not be anywhere possible. You can find all of their links under the radio tab on our website at thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.